Welcome to the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast.
Well, then Perez has got the better of it, and he looks to get the better of Schmeichel, and he's done it. Wilson's going to fall here for Alexis. Henry, chance.
Intelligent selection leads to effective performance and a rollicking 3-0 victory at home in our opening game of the season. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. That's right, we got the season off to a perfect start. 3-0 home victory. It's just what you want. The new signings come in and look fantastic. The manager got everything spot on. It's just really hard not to feel super optimistic about the title challenge. Obviously there was some worry with the results in August, but as they don't count, we really should just put those behind us and look to the future. So here to discuss that with me is Paul. You can find him on Twitter at PositiveMyPants. Hello, Pos.
Woohoo!
Woohoo, indeed. And Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Yes, so, look, we worked ourselves up. Let's face it. It's what we do as a fan base. But when the chips are down, Arsene knows what he's doing. And now that the season is officially underway, I think we can see that he's got it under control. So, wait, I'm being handed something now. They're going to count the points from August. All right, I'll scrap the opening and redo it in post after this. But that certainly puts a
we've
different
got 3 points from August to add to that.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So Paul, he didn't give Alexis a start. Not super surprising coming off the international break. But when you look at the mood around the club and around the way the window closed and around the way we've been, if not performing, certainly the results we put up in the performance at Anfield, this was just what he needed: easy, comfortable home victory, and it starts by getting the selection right. What did you make of the team he picked, and were you surprised at all to see him sticking with the back three?
So it's great when sometimes it's great when you take Arsene's choices away from him, and in a way he didn't have too many ways to go on this, and it proved to be a strength. No, I very much suspected, and I think I said at the last pod, that he'd stick with the back three. Basically, everybody was away. So to make the adjustments, yes, we know how to play with a back four, but to make the adjustments, he wasn't going to have much time to get everybody's buy-in to that. And I think it's as much an emotional switch for the squad as it is a tactical switch to say, hey, guys, we're giving up on a back three temporarily or long-term. That's significant. And I don't think he wanted to roll those dice. And I don't think you can stuff the genie back in the bottle after you pulled him out and then stuff him back in again. I'm not sure where we're at with the genie in the bottle at this point. But I think it would have been a huge move to go back to the back four. And it kind of would have been like bottling it. It would have been like the first time we'd a really bad performance, we bottled it and went back to a back four, says you really weren't invested in it at all. Now, I know we all have maybe different viewpoints as to how invested the manager is in it the long term, but to bottle it kind of game number four into the season. Yeah, into the season. After you've said you were going to, he didn't just say he'd start the first game. He said he'd start the season with it. It just would have looked weak. So I think, and let's be honest, it wasn't the issue. We kind of made the point the other way around, that he made our back three play like our back four had played for large parts of last year. So, if he were honest with himself, that wasn't the issue. It was really about mentality against Liverpool. You mentioned lineup and picking a better lineup. I still say that lineup was good enough to put in at least a decent performance, a strong performance at Liverpool, even if it wasn't our best lineup. The lineup we played at Liverpool should have been able to perform. And that team looked beat before it started, whereas this time round, our team went out charged up, pressing, playing, connecting, and yes, you can run. I ran Bournemouth through the Crapatron 4000, which, as you may remember, is this analog device with wheels and cogs that I use to decipher our performances against shit teams in shit circumstances. And even at the end of that, we were really good, and yes, they were a bit shit.
I agree with that. I mean, I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. By the way, I have a Rube Goldberg machine that makes the cold opens I do for the podcast, so we each have our own thing.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's fair to say that he picked the back three the way we'd want him to pick the back three instead of the way he had been, shoehorning players into positions that don't necessarily fit them. I think it's interesting, just as an aside, I don't know if we need to get into it right now, to see Monreal develop into that because, for the most part, I think he has been one of those quietly really important players for us through the seasons, and the way he's now adapting to just being one of the three in the back three is really impressive. But Clive, the players that obviously are still under the microscope to some extent are Lacazette and Kolasinac, being that they're the new arrivals, and they both had a big impact on the game. But I want to start with Kolasinac. This was his first chance to start as a left wing back, and while he didn't have a lot to do defensively, which may have a big impact on how we feel about his performance, he certainly was involved in the attack. One of the things I noticed, when he was able to get to the end line, he prefers the cut back. He seems to be much more intelligent about the final ball than any of the players we've seen playing in that position. Is he I know it's on the basis of one start, but does he seem to be a different class of attacking wingback than what we've had on either side, really, for several seasons?
Yeah, he is going to be a major player for us because the way we attack, we are very left-sided biased, right? So we attack for Alexis a lot, and it's very important that that combination really, really works. And what he adds is timing. But you're absolutely right, Elliot. When he gets into the final bit, when most people lose their composure, he almost gains composure. And on the cross, although he was running at full speed, he sort of dinked that cross. And the moment he left his boot, he thought, we're going to get a chance from this. He really, so a lot of people in British football, they hit areas. He hits players. He really picks people out. Sometimes you get an ooh from the crowd for putting a cross into a good area. Then it's the forwards issue for not getting there. This guy says, no, I'm in this situation. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to make an assist happen. And he really does have a great point,
Clive. Can I just throw in, you hit something for me that I hadn't realized before, which is how accurate all his crosses have been. And is that because he gets to the byline, but also quite close in? He's not swinging them from where, say, Ox would have swung them.
Yeah, he drives. But the interesting thing is, Paul, he's got different types of crosses. He's obviously got the power to do the power flat cross low down across the face. But he's got dinks. I mean, I went to the pre-season game and he dinked one there. Yep. This was like a dink cross where he sort of faded it into the area. So he's a serious guy when he gets into the last third. I thought Welbeck, although he played really, really well, there was a couple of occasions where he didn't read the 1-2 with Kolasinac, and basically we just broke down a couple of times, and there's a few murmurs in the crowd. But as soon as he gets the ball as he wants it, then those murmurs go away. And funny enough, when Alexis came on, they did a couple of 1-2s that look very interesting for the future. So I see a real combining player there, and one's going to get a lot of assists. I see the other side with Bellerin more of a counter-attacking side and a bit more of a wall pass side rather than a pure assist side, So yeah, the two of them are a great balance.
Surely it will benefit him to see another wide player being a little more thoughtful about the final ball, looking up, picking out a man, pulling it back, playing. Because I even saw Bellerin making some, and maybe this is pure narrative or ad hoc analysis, but playing a little bit more intelligently to the top of the box instead of whipping it in. I think when you have Oxlade-Chamberlain or Kieran Gibbs, in the wide position on the other side, you don't necessarily have that person that you can use as a role model in a way. And I think Kolasinac's approach to how he plays the final ball can only help Bellerin in terms of seeing the right way to do it.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you there. I think both sides, they didn't just bash the ball in. If the ball wasn't there or a player wasn't there, they turned out or they recycled again and played, moved the ball around until we had the right type of possession that we wanted. Bournemouth allowed us to do it. It's quite interesting watching the team allowing Arsenal to dictate the pace of the game they want to play versus a team like Liverpool that didn't really allow us to play how we want to play. And that's something we have to crack this year. What happens when we get pressurized and can't find the rhythm and pace of pass? Where do we go as a unit? Because once this team got into a rhythm, they looked unstoppable. Then you ask yourself, well, why was that? Did Bournemouth let us? Or were we just very tenacious and very aggressive and very, very much focused? I think it's a bit of both. I think it's amazing what a bit of criticism does. Home game, the crowd was very sort of expectant and wondering what we were going to see. And the players took it away. They just said, we're going to play and you'll have to support us. And that's how it turned out.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear. The one thing that neither of you have brought up yet is that by selling Oxlade-Chamberlain, the curse is now at Liverpool. And so we are free of it. I don't think you can chalk it up to coincidence that we lost 4-0 in his final game with us, and they lost 5-0. Was it 5-0? It was 5-0.
Yeah,
it was 5-0.
In his first game with them.
Disappointingly.
Yeah, disappointingly. And so I think quite clearly that all of you Arsene Wenger haters out there now have to admit the problem was Oxlade-Chamberlain all along. So now that we got that out of the way, Paul, final thoughts on the lineup and in particular maybe Danny Welbeck?
Yeah, so the fascinating question is, if Alexis had been available and fully fit, would arguably the man of the match Welbeck, and when you look at the pressing, obviously the breakdown from Adrian Clark this morning,
he called out how well we pressed. Yep.
Yeah, and I thought we pressed well, but it wasn't until I saw that segment I saw just how we pressed really well, not just effectively, coordinated. It wasn't a 2-man or a 3-man. It was a 5-man press, especially in the early stages. I thought that was excellent, and Clive did hit on this. But I mean, we don't. You don't have to
give him credit, Paul. Seriously.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
I'm taking it.
Nah,
trust me. The only time I give Clive credit is when he demands it. So he really does deserve it.
He just so everyone knows, he typed in huge capital letters in our Skype chat. That was my point, Paul. Please credit me. So I don't want you to think Paul did this out of the kindness of his heart. Okay, keep going. Sorry,
I did not have a choice, but I mean, Welbeck is our best presser, I think. And if you're the manager, you know what you're going to get from him every game. I mean, he was actually our best presser of not many against for his section against Liverpool. But if we play Alexis in this game, does Welbeck get on the field, and who does he get on instead of?
It's a fair question. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons the back three is also going to come back into focus versus a back four, just in terms of what we do about the midfield and getting that extra attacking player on. Welbeck obviously had the moment where he pressed Begovic, took the ball off him. Lacazette was maybe unlucky not to get there a half step sooner and score. Begovic made a good recovery save. And then one of the goals came from Lacazette pressing, chasing back, getting the ball off the Bournemouth players. And I think, look, we have tried to press a little bit from the front throughout this season. It just hasn't been as coordinated as it was in this game. Maybe they're figuring out how to do it. It also may be the fact that Bournemouth really didn't look comfortable getting the ball out from the back, that emboldened us to really get into them, realizing that we could take the ball off them. I think what's problematic for us with the press is when they start to break it, when they start to have that outlet pass or know how to break it down, a lot of times I think we either give up pressing or we're reluctant to press, or we do it unintelligently. I mean, think of how many times this season we've seen Xhaka when the possession changes over, Xhaka pressing up at a time when he shouldn't be. I still think the instincts have to be right.
One of our. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think this is probably our best pressing performance in recent memory, including the games against Chelsea. Mm-hmm. I thought this wasn't a 3-man or 4-man press. The whole front 5, 6 or so were in a coordinated fashion, especially in the early stages. It's clear to me what the game plan was, and we really stuck it to them. And I just wonder how good a performance it would have been without Welbeck, and how you get him in the team when Alexis gets picked. So that's kind of a fascinating question for me, what we do going forward. Because for me, he's a starter without a nailed-on position. He's
mm-hmm.
in this format. I don't even think you can say he's a utility player, apart from the fact that you could play him at striker, but probably we won't do from now on.
The funny thing is, despite his challenges with finishing, and obviously he rectified that to some extent in this game, it's hard to think of too many performances where we looked insipid, lifeless, without threat in games where Welbeck started. Now, that's meaningless if he's not finishing the chances. I mean, he had the first chance of the game against Liverpool. He didn't put it away. But he definitely gives you that energy, that pressing, that capability to affect the game in the air, on the ground, with his running, with his tracking back. Now, I know, obviously, Clive, we don't like to pick on Paul, but as you have sort of a better seeing of the game and know the answer to the question he posed, I guess I'll just let you answer it. Paul seems a little flummoxed about what to do with Welbeck vis-a-vis Alexis's return. Why don't you go ahead and educate us?
No, I just think we have some decisions to make.
Well, don't be humble now. Tell us the answer, man.
Well, we're going to Chelsea. Right? That's what we all think about at the back of our minds. And we are going away to a top 6 team, and we don't win. And I asked myself, where was the confidence to put that amount of energy in at Anfield? So by picking someone like Welbeck, and I would pick him over Ozil for the Chelsea game. I know that's probably going to make some people wonder, but, ask yourself a question. The energy required for a away game when we have 2 in midfield, we need a number of people working very hard at the top end of the pitch. And I'm not saying Ozil didn't work very hard against Bournemouth. I went to the game and he worked incredibly hard.
He had the most sprints of anybody in the game. I think it was
70.
Yeah, 70 sprints in the game.
Sprints.
Yeah, he was all over the pitch.
He was all over the pitch. And I'll tell you what, even in the 90th minute, he was on the last man, wanted the ball played down the sides. So it wasn't just in patches, it was for the entire game. But we can't be afraid to say, okay, it hasn't worked in a top 6 away for a while. And maybe we need more energy, more aggression, more fitness for the start of a game. And then we make changes later on. And let's try something else. Let's have, Welbeck, Alexis and Lacazette maybe up front, and have the 2 in midfield. We keep talking about 3 at the back, and I firmly believe 3 is the magic number we need to think about. We have 2 decisions all season, whether it's 3 at the back.
Is that a subtle way, just quickly? Is that your subtle way of saying we should permanently remove Tim from the pod and just keep it to 3 of us? Because that's super passive aggressive. You could just tell him on WhatsApp or something.
I bumped into Tim in the game, so I actually bumped into him in the stand. So we had a good.
Now, that's not passive aggressive. That's just aggressive.
Yeah, we had a 1-minute podcast, and which was podcast gold that would never be released. Had a quick chat, and but yeah, we had a good laugh after the game. So
good stuff. Go on. Sorry.
So yeah, it was 3 is the magic number for me. It's 3 at the back or it's 3 in centre midfield. And you do what you need to do at the back to allow the 3 in centre midfield to actually happen. We have to think about centre midfield when we come to these bigger games because we can't do what happened at Liverpool all over again. And what happened in this game was there was a massive difference with the centre midfield compared to the Liverpool game. I thought a player that I'm not a fan of, Aaron Ramsey, played really well in this game, really controlled. And the way he moved, he normally moves in straight lines from the centre straight through to centre forward. And what he did a lot more this game was run on the arc, left to right, and was available to all players to give him the ball, and he recycled it really, really well. I often say if he ever decided to do as much running in a smaller space, he could be a really dominant midfielder and allow us to have overloads in other areas. But what he chooses to do sometimes is play football in areas where he can't get back from. And I thought he was much smarter and only started to break forward when we were 3-0 up and when the game was done. And I thought he was a very, very good performance. And it shows you what can happen when you play under instruction, when you're coached and have respect for your teammates, that all units can actually work.
Yeah, I think this is good to see. The interesting thing, Paul, that I would say here is if you wanted to be a little bit, not cynical, but if you wanted to be a little, contrarian, I guess is the word I'm looking for, you could say that actually, other than the Liverpool game, we've played well, in particular in the attacking half, in every single game this season. We scored 4 in the opening game, in a game that we probably should have won much more comfortably. On XG, we were dominant. The Stoke game, we created lots of great opportunities. We were unlucky not to have a goal counted for us, unlucky not to get penalties. On XG, we dominated that game. And we were dominant on XG in this game and scored 3 and could have had more. Putting the Liverpool game aside, because of all the problems that we've had facing pressing teams and top 6 sides away and all the things we've already discussed, was this game actually really a change at all, or more of the same of what we've seen all season other than the Liverpool game?
I take your point on the attacking side. It feels like a change because all the pieces worked. The integration of our midfield with defence was. I think Clive makes a great point on Ramsey. His discipline, being tuned into where he needed to be, was much stronger in this, and I really felt that throughout the team, going forwards or backwards, particularly going backwards, they'd got the memo, which we hadn't seen in the first two games, where, as you said, offensively we were quite impressive going forward. So to me, that's the big change. This was a much more balanced, integrated team, but really thriving off the pressing. A coordinated press, pressurizing them in their final third, but then in a coordinated fashion, falling back as a unit when they had the ball. So it's just like we got the message right. It may have had a lot to do with playing people in position, playing players who knew how to play the system. And I think a lot to do with Welbeck. I think Alexis is going to be a huge player for us, potentially, as usual. But he's, especially at the moment with his mindset, it seems like he's a little separated out from the team, and maybe I'm projecting on performances that haven't happened yet. I think Welbeck was a big piece of this performance because he's probably our ultimate team player, and in this team pressing and defending from the front, I think it was a huge piece of why this worked as an integrated 11-man performance.
He certainly creates that little bit of chaos, and I think you need that player who can run in behind, that player who is all energy, who's nipping at people's heels, who, I mean, for the goal he almost scored, the chip goal, not just the acceleration, but the footwork. I mean, there was a lot of technical skill there. And if he starts to put all that together, we've always said he's a 9 or 10 out of 10 player in everything but finishing. And if he starts to develop a confidence in front of goal, it does become a challenge to find ways to leave him out. But Paul, I guess I'll stay with you just for a second, and then I'll come to Clive, because I know midfield is a big issue for Clive. I mean, you can look at this another way. 7 a.m. Kickoff did a great By the Numbers piece for our blog. You should go look at it. You specifically, Paul. Educate yourself, man. No, everyone should go look at it. And I think the interesting thing is Xhaka had the lowest pass completion percentage of anyone in the entire squad, other than Cech. 72.7% completion percentage, which is terrible from a central midfielder, especially one who's expected to be the person who starts the attack, who collects it from the back four, who is the last line of defense in a very real way. Ramsey wasn't much better in the 70s. In fact, the majority of our midfield and attacking players had completion percentages in the 70s. And there was a period in the 80th minute where Mustafi was sliding Koscielny in on goal in the penalty area. We were pushed way up the pitch at times. There were center backs 2/3 of the way up the pitch. Xhaka and Ramsey at times were in the final third. And so I guess, are we still I mean, if Bournemouth had more composure on the ball, a better out ball, maybe a speedier or more powerful player to run in, are the warning signs still there? Are we still potentially allowing ourselves to be sucked too far up the pitch, to let our midfield get too disconnected from the center backs, and that vulnerability was still there, just sort of concealed by the fact that Bournemouth didn't have the players or the ability to exploit it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's something to that. I mean, the eye test of the game, I'm surprised that the stats you're quoting in terms of how many passes we missed, it didn't feel like that. I don't feel we were taking risks. I think maybe we just played the opposition, and when you don't sense the threat for them, you might as well go bigger on your passes. I think we were just taking the energy and going for it, and taking higher risk passes, because there were goals at the end of those every time it came off. So, but you might be right. Maybe it's a false dawn, but that's my feeling on it. We were just we turned up the dial. Mm-hmm. Xhaka was looking for those line breaking passes, and there were another 3, 4, 5 goals in this for us if everything had come off for us. So there was I remember an eye-catching through ball that put Ozil into the box. I think that was his one with his shot on goal. And it kind of caught my eye because there were easier good passes, but he spotted this one straight off because I think that's where everybody's eye was. They were going for the big swing at this point. So maybe that's it. Maybe you're right. Maybe there's more trouble to come.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I'm not saying we played poorly. I think what we did really effectively is the minute the ball was lost, we were switched on to pressing and winning it back. And Bournemouth didn't have the composure or the options as an outlet to recover from that. And so when we lost the ball, we actually turned it into an opportunity to create attacks, essentially counter-pressing. And we got a first-hand look at how dangerous that can be at Liverpool before the international break. And I think we did some of the same things to Bournemouth. I mean, Clive, that is really the question, though, right? I mean, we can come on to Lacazette and where the team goes from here in terms of reintegrating Alexis, but it is going to be sort of the midfield and how the midfield gives us balance that I think determines our season to some extent. I mean, can you make an argument that despite the heavy defeats away to the Big Six, which we have to find a way to stamp out, I mean, you can't keep doing that, it's embarrassing, that this way of playing, that getting all these attacking players into the final third, that pushing players up, that putting bad teams under pressure is actually the right way to play these smaller sides because you're not looking for 1 point, you're looking for 3. And that while it sometimes means we're defending one-on-one in situations that look like we're disorganized or like we don't have a plan, is it maybe the plan? We can't be doing this haphazardly. Is it maybe the plan that Arsenal's saying to win the league or to finish in top 4, you have to take max points against smaller teams, and the best way to do that is to push into their defensive third?
It could be. I think what was interesting was the confidence in our group to do the right thing. I mean, I want to know where the energy was at Anfield. So it's interesting you speak about Xhaka's numbers. The first thing I do when I look at our centre midfield is I look at their energy levels and their distances. And what I saw was Xhaka doing a lot of running into wide areas to cover fullbacks and really be mobile. It probably caused him to maybe lack a little bit of control. They were working very hard. There was one part of the game where Ramsey sort of slightly to the left, he turns in and he turns out, and he plays a blind pass out to the right wing back and just boots it out of play. But he was so keen to move the ball quickly and get it out of that middle third so that we don't lose the ball in transition and then be broken into our back 3. And everyone jeered, and I thought, you know what, at least I know the decision that he made was the right decision. We just weren't in position to receive the ball. But what I don't want to see is us getting clogged down with slow passing at the centre midfield. When you're receiving the ball, you're standing still target. What happens is the opposing players get your head down, take the ball off you, and run unopposed onto our back line. And that happens so many times at Anfield. We move the ball so much quicker. And I keep saying to myself and to anyone who will listen, what's going to happen to Arsenal when we can't move the ball? Where do we go then? What's our game plan? How do we exit? How do we build confidence? How do we build momentum? And what teams have done for many, many years, they've put us under pressure so we can't move the ball. They foul us strategically to make sure we don't get no rhythm. And they upset us. And what we do is we overcommit. On the first time you overcommit, they score against us and they sit in. That's what teams have done for many, many years. And we still need to fix that problem. I do think seeing the energy of the group, you could tell within 10 minutes. Remember I said to you, Paul, last week, we'll know in 5 minutes how we're going to play? Well, the first 5 minutes, we were perfect, right? The speed. And I think the team has to realise that our strength, the way we attack, is actually in wide areas. How we connect, say, Ozil to Bellerin on that side, and how we connect Alexis to Kolasinac on the left-hand side. We are a team that attacks on the inside shoulder, outside shoulders of wide players. And we really drive, and we are very intelligent around the box. I've got a Chelsea season ticket holder friend, and I say to him, how do we compare to Tottenham? And he says, with Tottenham, when they get around our box, it's far more muscle-bound. They smash the ball in, and we can deal with that. We're quite muscle-bound ourselves. When you get around the box, it's far more controlled, far more thoughtful. And it's quite interesting to see how other teams see you. When you get around our box, we all get worried as fans. So we have to keep you away from our box. And that's what they try to do, especially when we play away from home. So I think we have got a real strength and real thought process and real creativity around opponent's box. We just got to get there, and Liverpool didn't let us get there. And I'm sure Chelsea will do their best not to let us get there on Sunday. But I really liked the energy and purposefulness and a team that looked really balanced. I thought it was our best back three. Monreal was very, very good. And it's always good sometimes when you go live. You see where the players, who they rely on, and the amount of times Monreal gets the ball. And when he gets the ball, there's not a murmur from anybody who think he's going to lose it. He's got 2 or 3 what I call composure moves where he can either cross his way out of it or just goes one touch down the line. He looks really comfortable. He follows his pass. He presses in the other half. He wins his first headers. He's a very good player on that position. He could get a new contract. I really think he could, because he knows that position really, really well. And the guy on the outside is doing all his running for him, and he can play the passes through to Alexis. He can play it to Ramsey. He can play it to the forwards. It looked really good. It looked very good, very balanced. And it's a shame you had to wait till game 4 to see the balanced team that we've been yearning for the last few weeks.
Yeah, and it's hard not to go back and want to complain about. I mean, I don't think anything was changing the Liverpool outcome, but you look at Kolasinac on the left, and the kind of service, the kind of delivery he provided, and it's hard not to think that maybe there could have been an extra chance or two in the Stoke game, to change the outcome there. But ultimately, we are where we are, and I do think selling Oxlade-Chamberlain is addition by subtraction. I do think it helps sort of force balance on Arsene Wenger. I actually thought this was a good game for Bellerin, by the way, who seemed a lot more comfortable in his natural position again. Paul, one thing that I think is interesting about the way we play right now is and this sort of relates maybe to Alexis coming back into the squad too, is we don't have a dribbler in the side, and we completed fewer dribbles against Bournemouth than I think Oxlade-Chamberlain does in a single game. It does seem to me that we are missing someone who can carry the ball from midfield into attack, who can beat a man and pull players out of position and be a little bit elusive. I think what made Cazorla so special, and in particular special enough that he could be effective with Coquelin, is that he could do the job of 2 midfielders because his passing was exceptional, but he could get out of tight spaces on his own. Do you feel that that's maybe something that we're missing that might be a reason to bring Alexis back now with Oxlade-Chamberlain gone? No one who is able to collect the ball in the attacking phase and beat a man and carry it forward and sort of pull defenses out of position and break down press?
Yeah, I mean, Alexis can do some of that, but he'll
also lose the ball 20 times a game, but that's a different issue.
He will.
Yeah.
But he's really, I mean, he does drop back into midfield from time to time, but that's his part-time job. His day job is going to keep him in other spaces, so we definitely have that vulnerability. A short, quick passer in midfield and a dribbler out of midfield, kind of 2 of the things Santi gives you, where he can very quickly kind of stitch something when under pressure to play us out. And that's not really Ramsey, and it's not Xhaka. So the big question will still be, when a team effectively presses our midfield for long periods of a game, how well do we handle that? And I didn't see anything against Bournemouth that made me think that problem was solved.
Well, it's interesting because it's been a feature of Arsene Wenger's sides, right? I mean, he's had either a powerful or if not a powerful, a little technical player who could drive forward with the ball from midfield, whether it was Vieira in the more powerful mold, or Rosicki, or Santi Cazorla. Oxlade-Chamberlain presumably was someone he thought would become that guy, but Jack Wilshere should have been that guy. I think that ship has sailed. I'm not sure it's worth really delving into that, but that's something that Arsene Wenger's sides have had that
it has,
seems
but
to be missing.
He hasn't actively sought out that player, it would seem, for a long time. It's not just that we didn't sign that player.
I mean, Diaby, obviously we know what happened there. He had guys, I think he thought.
When was the
could
last
be that
time
guy.
we... Yeah, but if you look at the last 4 or 5 years, when was the last time we were even chasing somebody?
Well, Cazorla definitely was that guy, right? I mean, Santi should have been that guy for a while, and injuries broke that down. And I mean, if he was true in his statement that Oxlade-Chamberlain eventually would be a central midfielder, maybe that was where he saw that next guy coming from and didn't feel he needed to chase that. But we talk about balance, and part of balance is how you position your players on the pitch. But I do wonder if with a 2-man midfield, it can work without someone who's able to just carry the ball up towards the attackers past that first line of defense in midfield.
I think ultimately that's right. And besides, as you said, Wilshere or playing or discovering some younger player, whether it's Maitland-Niles or we start playing Willock in the second half of the season there with some miraculous new discovery of a midfielder. I don't think we have that player in our squad today. What gives me some hope that maybe we will handle that midfield pressure in a bigger game. But what we do have is a coordinated front pressing unit that's part of an overall team approach, at least based on Bournemouth. If we can keep that going forward, that looked to be part of an overall strategy with playing out from the back. And I thought it was particularly notable from Cech through Monreal and through Xhaka, how semi-suicidal, in a positive way, how committed we were to playing out from the back, especially in the first half when the game was well up for grabs. And if we can combine a coordinated pressing and counter-pressing and cool, calm, collected playing out from the back along the wings, I think that'll go a considerable way to relieving the pressure on our midfield. It doesn't obviate the need for having a guy who can play clever passes out and dribble his way out through midfield, but we don't have that. But if we have the other two pieces of it, I think we can certainly handle the press and the pressure against the bigger teams compared to how we performed last year. So I think overall pretty hopeful.
Yeah, and you know, the thing that I think is unfortunate in a way is you have to make a choice that you don't want to have to make. I mean, we already have to make the choice probably of benching Welbeck, who I think has done nothing to deserve that, to make room for Alexis, who I think you have to play Alexis. He's still our best player, and I don't think you get very far without that. But the reality is maybe what would help the team in its weakest area, midfield, would be to take Alexis and Welbeck out of that role of one of the two behind the striker and turn that into an Iwobi role or something like that. Someone else who is more of a link-up play type player, a connective player, adding an additional player who can kind of drop deeper into midfield and connect with Xhaka and Ramsey, especially as Ramsey is making those runs forward, so that there's a little more control. But then you say, do we have enough goals in the side just playing the one striker with Ozil and Iwobi behind? And I think that points to the challenge with the back three, that the squad was never built to be a back three squad, and now you're seeing some difficult choices needing to be made with personnel that maybe would be more suited to a back four, trying to get players on the pitch. Iwobi, for example, who is such a talented player, just does not appear to have a way back into the squad anytime soon. Maybe with Europa coming up, he will, and we'll come to that in just a second. But before we talk Europa and then ultimately Chelsea, Clive, I want to finish with this game, and there's a lot more we could get to. When Alexis came on, I thought he looked really bright, by the way. I thought he had a really good cameo. I think he was a little bit unlucky. He was very good, created chances, had chances, and did not look fat, so there's that. But as far as Lacazette, he is not a Robin van Persie in the sense that he's going to drop deep and link up and then get into the box and get on the end of it. And I think, you know, maybe he's going to be a little more in the Walcott mold in the sense of not going to have a mountain of touches and passes. But in terms of his tracking back, winning the ball, he did win the ball to create a goal. I think it was to create Welbeck's second. He did almost score a goal, helping Welbeck press from the front. He took his chance that he did finish beautifully and created some opportunities with really just silky touches and intelligent play. I mean, it's been a few games now. Unfortunately, he didn't start against Liverpool, but I know this was not necessarily the guy you wanted. Are you feeling pretty good about who we've got on our hands now?
Yeah, I didn't know much about him before he came, and I was wondering what he would be like.
No, wait, I got to stop you. You're doing this wrong. You watch 2 minutes on YouTube, and then you say you know the player inside out and talk like an expert. But okay, we work on that later. I thought he was hard to read. It's easy to see the goals, but I'm thinking to myself, would he survive in England? Is he strong enough? And some people that I know that really do watch the French league were absolutely adamant. And these are just not, Euro hipster. These are people that really think this through. And I said, okay, I'm going to hold my thoughts, hold my gut feel. And, watching him pre-season, watch him again on Saturday, he's an adult footballer.
And we don't buy ready-made footballers very often. And he's a ready-made adult footballer that knows his role, that looks to link, is very efficient on the ball. And when you watch a game, you think, okay, if he turns right, the game's going to open up. And he just turns right. Right? And if you were to I remember Arsene Wenger said something about Cesc Fabregas one time. He said, when I was watching him when he was young, I would when you get the ball, I'd see there are 4 options. I would freeze the video and say, that's the best option. I'd start it again. And every time I started it again, he chose the best option. I thought that's a player that understands the game. I sometimes feel that about Lacazette. You watch him, you think, there's the best option, and he chooses it. Whether it's shot selection, pass selection, how to hold it, when to tackle, he does the right thing. I think our challenge is to get him to touch the ball a bit more often, because he's quite a quiet guy, quiet footballer that just goes about his job in a very cool Bob Marley type way. And when the ball lands at his feet, you just think, you get excited, and you think, why? Because he's doing everything correctly. And you heard me speak about Danny Welbeck and how he sometimes can look a little bit wild with what I call a lack of shot preparation. And funny enough, he got his stride pattern perfect for the second goal. But when he approaches the box, he's too fast, he's too rushed. Even his first goal, he nearly overran it and headed it back onto himself. He just needs to calm down. He just needs to look at Lacazette, because everything he does, the way he approaches the football, is technically perfect. Good. Do
you think the reason he's so calm is all the marijuana you referred to him smoking?
Well, maybe. I'm not sure what he's doing, but
you mentioned Bob Marley. I assume that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly right. He's just very cool. I mean, when he took his shot, I think almost everybody in the ground expected that to hit the back of the net. No right to, 20 yards out, but the way he approached it, the way he looked at the chance, and he didn't just strike it, he lifted it into the corner. I mean, he's a proper footballer, and I think if we can, there is a level of adaptation for these guys, and Kolasinac as well. Kolasinac towards the last 10 minutes, he was on it, hands on his knees. He was finding it very tiring. And sometimes we all want to see these guys out there, but there is a level of intensity of our game that does take a bit of time to get used to. And maybe, although we don't like it, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. We want to see him out there all the time, all our new shiny players. But maybe they would struggle to play every 3-4 days at that level of intensity at, say, Anfield. So I'm trying to find reasons, but he looks very, very, very much an Arsenal footballer. And anyone he plays with is going to look good. Yeah. Because he understands how our game is. And I don't know how he arrived at us. Maybe he could have gone to Atletico Madrid, but to me, he's made a real good football stylistic choice to come and play with Ozil, Sanchez, Giroud, anybody. They all talk his language. That's what I'm trying to say.
It certainly.
I was particularly impressed by how fluid our front three were. It wasn't at all a 2 with the 1 in front of them, and very often they'd line up with Welbeck in the middle and Lacazette on the right. Ozil was the breakdown covered that pretty well. Ozil had those runs in behind from being on the corner of the defender. I thought it was a really integrated front three, pressing wise and attacking wise and getting in behind wise.
Yeah, and
definition. Sorry, and definition. and definition of roles, right? That's what you're that's what you're leading to. They all took up the role that was required at that moment. So if Lacazette went short, then Ozil went spun wide. Ozil spins very early. The moment we get the ball, he's off, and his movement demands the ball to be on its way. And Welbeck, just energy, just work rate and effort. We just follow his example. So yeah, it was a lovely balance. And I do look around the league. And I'm always looking at Chelsea and Tottenham, right? But you look at Chelsea, Tottenham, Manchester United, and you look at, say, Tottenham with, Eriksen, Ali and Kane, and then you look at our front 3/4, Alexis, Ozil and Lacazette. I think that stands up with anybody's. I really do. We haven't seen it yet, but I think it stands up with anybody. I think it stands up with Lukaku, Rashford, Mkhitaryan. I think it stands up with them. I think it stands up with City, Aguero, Jesus, Sane, whichever combination you want to play, Sterling. Our front 3 has got real potential. It's got balance. It's got the right age profile around it. They're not kids. They're adults. They know the game. They're experienced. I think a lot. I know we put a lot of emphasis into Alexis this year to get us into the top 4. There's £6 million burning a hole in our club finances. But if they all hit it off, let's see where we end up.
Yeah, and this is the problem, because I mean, there's Alexis and Ozil and Sanchez and Welbeck and Iwobi and Theo and Giroud and nobody in midfield. And once that sniper took out Francis Coquelin, which, I have no love for him, but you never want to see anyone take a sniper bullet in a football stadium.
He'd actually done, I know it was only Bournemouth.
I know he'd done fine. I know. It's fine.
He did well.
You know what?
But anyway.
You know what, Mr. Quixote? You don't need to tilt at this windmill. It's totally fine. Like, he was doing fine.
All right, Mr. Smart Arse. How are you playing Alexis and Sanchez then?
Well, they're the same person, so I'm just going to put one of them on the pitch and hope it works out.
You listed them twice.
I did. Okay, fine. Yeah. Son of a bitch. Welbeck, Alexis, Ozil, Lacazette. That's it. That's the guy. But by the way, you know what I love about Lacazette? When he gets the ball, the game seems to slow down. He doesn't snatch at it. He doesn't panic. If you look at some of these players, Ox, Theo, even Giroud to some extent, guys that we've had since, dare I say it, Van Persie, they've kind of been Welbeck even. They've snatched at the ball. They've been a little bit uncomfortable and wasteful in the final third. And Lacazette seems to be so clear on what he wants to do with the ball. The game slows down. He feels very comfortable in those critical areas, and that's what you need. The players that win things feel very comfortable with the ball at their feet in the critical areas where they can hurt you, and he seems to have that.
He's silk.
So we've got those attacking options. It's midfield where there's going to be an issue, and we are going to have to figure that out, because at some point Ramsey and Xhaka aren't going to play together, and it's not like they've been perfect, but they're at least something. So, Paul, I think we will do a podcast after the Europa League game. So I don't want to talk Chelsea yet, because we'll probably do a little bit of a gloss over on the Europa League game, which for us would be like 55 minutes, and then we'll talk Chelsea. So let's just stick with Europa League. Look, I think all of us are of a slightly different mind about how seriously to take the Europa League, but in this case, with a big away game, a scary away game at the weekend, Sunday, and a Thursday game against Cologne, or however you say it, however you want to say it however you want. I'm personally not too concerned about it. I think my expectation is that it'll be a mix of experience and youth. Do you think he'll go full Capital One Cup, or whoever the hell the sponsor is now, Cup? Or do you think this is going to be a stronger team than maybe we expect?
I think it's going to be a really strong Capital One Cup.
Well, that's a fair point. All those players I named. I mean, Giroud and Theo and Iwobi, and right. I mean, there's a lot of good guys there.
There's a great front three. The midfield's the big question, and also whether he'd really leave both Alexis and Ozil out from just a consistency of creation standpoint. But if he's going to play El Neni and say Ainsley Maitland-Niles or Willock, that's kind of.
Well, the only one who seems to be banging on the door is Reece Nelson, right?
Yeah. So I see him as our right wing back for sure. Left wing back's an interesting question.
Yeah.
That's really the missing piece for me. In midfield, he's got a few options, but he's probably going to want an experienced player somewhere in the midfield. But I don't know. Those are the
Who's
two
it going to be? El Neni and who?
And who?
Yeah.
So does he play Xhaka on the basis that Xhaka seems to have good legs at the end of the day, stamina-wise? Clive?
Mate, I wouldn't play any of the players that are playing.
Why do you hate the Europa League so much? It may not be the competition we want, but it's the competition we deserve.
Don't care. I honestly don't care. We're playing Thursday night to Sunday lunchtime, and that's short, right? So
at least it's in London. We're not going far.
Yeah, but I wouldn't play any of them, right? So the sort of team I'd pick, right? I wrote this down earlier. So I'd go Ospina, obviously. I'd go back three again with Mertesacker, Chambers is back fit, and Holding. I would play Debussy right wing back, right? Might as well get him out there. Okay. He's got £80,000 a week. He might as well earn some of it, right? So, and I don't mind him playing right centre back, and maybe Chambers playing wing back, because we're going to need Chambers to learn that position. Because in my mind, he's potentially the backup for Bellerin.
Not
there's
Nelson?
And I'll tell you why. Nelson for me will be one of the two behind the striker. His best position is where Alexis plays, and that's where he'll end up. When Alexis goes, that's where he'll end up playing for us in the first team, I hope. If we're playing wing back, that's a crime. The guy is incredible, and he's a forward player. He's not an Oxlade-Chamberlain power runner winger. He can do it, but let's not do that to him. Put him into small spaces. He's got great awareness in crowds. I would definitely have him as one of those forward players. There's a young kid at left back called Josh De Silva who has played time in centre midfield. He's a very tall player. He's had time he had time at centre half. He's been as a striker as a kid. He's now playing left wing back for the under-23s and looks really impressive. Along with Nelson, is probably one of the most impressive youngsters with Ainsley Maitland-Niles that we've seen so far this season. I wonder if he'll stick with a back three, because it's quite easy to introduce a young player into a back three and just say run up and down that left-hand side and have fun, rather than playing a back four where you could find.
Isn't that what he says to all his players in all his games?
Yeah, you could be right. You could be right. I see El Neni in centre mid with Jack, and I'd like to see us play three.
You think Wilshere will start?
I think Wilshere will definitely start.
Oh, for God's sake!
It seemed like Arsene, though, because he was asked in the press conference, and he was kind of like scrambling at the thought of Wilshere playing in the Europa League. So I'm not sure it was his first thought, but with Coquelin injured, I guess that shakes it up. So
yeah, it does. Coquelin would have played for definite, and probably would have been Coquelin, El Neni, and Jack may have been in one of the forward positions. But I mean, I'd see El Neni and Jack playing, and I'd like to see three in centre midfield. I think Iwobi, who had a really good pre-season, and sort of been thrown to the curb. I'd like to see him play as a 3-5-2 with Theo and Giroud up front, and bring on Nelson later on and the younger players later on. But I would definitely, but maybe Alexis may be on the bench because he needs game time. Alexis may start in Iwobi's position and then come off after 55 minutes. So that's where we're going to get our experience from. But yeah, there's plenty there, right? There's plenty of players there that need to play. And so that's not really a young team. That's an experienced team, apart from maybe Josh De Silva playing in there. I would love to see Maitland-Niles get some time in centre midfield. I think he potentially is that physical player that we miss. He's not experienced enough. He hasn't been tested. But when I worry about Arsenal is when our rhythm stops, where do we go? Can we physically cope? Can we physically run with Bakayoko and Kante on a tight Chelsea pitch when as soon as they win it, give it to Hazard, 5 yards they're on the edge of our box? That's what it feels like sometimes at Stamford Bridge compared to Wembley, where we do very well against them, because it's a much bigger surface and we can recover into the big spaces. So that's the type of team I'd like to see, and interesting to see what formation he chooses, or if he chooses to experiment with a 4-3-3 with three in midfield to see how that would work for the game at the weekend.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, look, I hate to point this out, but this is a Bundesliga team that we're playing. I know they lost their top goal scorer in the summer, but I mean, like, would we put that kind of side out for... Bournemouth, I guess, would be a team that comes to mind, or, a Huddersfield or something, and they probably are above that level anyway. So I think at some point we have to decide, do we want to get out of this group? I mean, it's a group we should easily get out of, but I don't know that we can do it playing the kind of teams you guys are suggesting. I mean, maybe on the strength of the attacking power we have with a Giroud and a Walcott and a Iwobi or whatever, that's enough to get it done. But given that our best 11 is not very good defensively, I don't know how much confidence I would have in basically a U23 side back there plus Per Mertesacker.
No, I think if you look at that team, honestly, if you look at that team, we got 140 grand Theo up front with Giroud.
No, I agree. The attacking is not an issue.
Yeah. But we've got El Neni in there. There's one kid in my team in De Silva, and maybe that won't happen. That's just a guess.
Well, Chambers and Holding, I guess that's fair. They're not U23 guys. They're just young first team players, I suppose.
Exactly, that need to support a Per Mertesacker, and he'll be there, right? So I'm okay with that. I mean, for me, I'm not even agrees with me, and I was talking to people today online. for me, the most important thing is to get Arsenal back into the top four. And surely, with the decision we've made with Alexis, that's our goal.
Wait, let me ask you this just real quick, though. I mean, if that's the goal, if the goal is to get back into the Champions League, because you don't care if you finish fourth. I mean, if they gave Champions League for finishing 8th, we'd be saying finish in the top 8. So if the goal is to get back in the Champions League, realistically, the only other team that should win the Europa League on odds, I realize it's a total crapshoot, is the team that falls out of Spurs' Champions League group. That's going to be a really good team, whoever it is. Dortmund, Madrid, Spurs, whoever it is. I mean, in theory, I guess Spurs could get hammered so badly in that group that they don't even get into the
But that doesn't make it 50-50.
No, I'm not. No, Paul, I'm not saying it makes it 50-50. I'm just saying that
it's probably 8-1.
All right, no, again, we've covered this. I get my point is not that we should feel entitled to it. What I'm saying is, which do you think are the longer odds, winning the Europa League or being better than
winning
two
the Europa
of
League? Not
two
even
of
close.
United, Chelsea, City, Spurs, and Liverpool? You think we can be better than 2 of those teams?
It's 8-1. We have a much better shot than 8-1 at getting in the top 4.
Yeah, I think the league has got to be everything. I mean, for so many reasons, right? We speak about the squad a lot. We speak about the things that potentially happening in the background. We got our 2 superstars not signing contracts. There are rumours of Ramsey being offered a contract and refused the first offer, which may be bartering, but we don't know. We just lost a 24-year-old to Liverpool. We've got a team of 30, approaching 30-year-olds. Our better players are at that level. And then we've got a group of younger players that are not quite there yet. We got Bellerin who's 21, 22, potentially he asked to leave. So what's really, really key for our future is that we get back to the top 4 so we can build how we want to build. If we don't get back into the top 4, then we'll be forced to build from we won't be shopping on the top shelf. We'll be shopping on the medium shelf, right? So there will be no choice in how we have to build because there will be 2 years out and we're going to have a significant rebuild. The contractual situation in the season is going to be huge. For me, top 4 via the league is really important, not just qualifying for it, but via the league, because positionally it makes us more attractive if we're really competing. And players want to see something that's moving forward. We've won cups before and it hasn't attracted people. So we need to make ourselves more attractive by being really competitive in the Premier League, in my opinion. But I do recognise that no one agrees with me at all.
No, I don't disagree with anything.
Based on what Manchester United did. But Manchester United had a massive squad with £250 million worth of investment, and they limped over the line. We haven't got that. We've got rid of a few of our squad. We can still name a competitive second team. We're going to lose that when injuries come on board, no doubt. I think it's very tiring competition that can only take away from the league. You can see what happens when we lose a league game, the world ends. For me, the league is everything, but let's see how we go, eh?
I'm with you, Clive. You can't fool the fat man. If you can't perform in the league, the ground you're on is so shaky as a team, a squad, a manager.
And I guess the question also becomes, look, the Europa League is the best way to destroy your league campaign. If you take it very seriously, you are essentially giving up on the league. We've seen that from other teams that have tried it. I am not prepared to say top 4 is gone. And to be fair, I don't like to point out when I'm wrong. Thankfully, it's not necessary very often. But, I mean, the odds on us finishing top 4, technically, according to the betting markets, at 2-1. And I think Paul's right, we're about 6 to 8-1 in the Europa League. So technically speaking, the odds suggest it'd be easier for us to get back into the top 4. But there will be time to debate all of that. As they say, judge me in May. So you guys can fuck off until then. In any event, hopefully we can win it. Look, I think it'll be interesting. It is, on the one hand, Chelsea are in the Champions League this week, and I think you could argue they have an easier game in the Champions League than we have in the Europa League, and they get to play the game a day earlier. They have a team that sounds vaguely like an epithet. Quarabag, right?
Carrier bag.
Carrier bag. I'm sorry if I offended anybody by saying that. Okay, so, at the end of the day, it is still not about the title of the competition, but the team that you're playing. And it's not like we're playing Carry a Bag or Young Boys or one of those ridiculous name teams. Anyway, no offense if you play for one of those teams. Okay, anyway, Paul's on Twitter at Pause in My Pants. Thanks, Pause.
Woo!
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Tim, who has a real job, was working at it late tonight, so he could not be on. We have no idea what we're going to do about putting a pod up post-Europa League. We will try. Maybe we will do it right at full time. If these guys are up for it, we'll talk about that offline because that seems like a really boring thing to talk about on the actual pod. but odds are we will all be back for the rehashing of the astounding victory at Stamford Bridge over the weekend. In any event, give us a 5-star review. Write nasty things about us in the comment section. I still strongly recommend writing them about Clive, but if you want to write it about the rest of us, that's fine too. You can, please do that. We would really appreciate it. In any event, we will talk to you after the game on Thursday. You know what? Football on Tuesday and Wednesday is boring. Anyway, everyone, up the Arsenal. Cheers to Thursday Night Football. Talk to you after that.